A successful man stepped off a crowded train, expecting nothing more than another ordinary evening. But then, something stopped him in his tracks. Sitting on the cold floor of the station was a beggar woman, holding out a small metal bowl, her eyes tired from years of struggle. At first, he was about to walk past like everyone else, but when she slowly lifted her face, his heart nearly stopped. Because the woman begging for coins was someone he once knew very well. Years ago, she was the confident girl who rejected his proposal, telling him he was too poor to give her the life she wanted. Back then, she walked away, chasing wealth and luxury, and he walked away with a broken heart. But now, fate had brought them together again in the most shocking way. The girl who once dreamed of a glamorous future was now begging at a train station, and the man she rejected had become successful beyond anything she imagined. What happened to her life, and what would he do now? Walk away or change her fate forever?
The train station was crowded, noisy, and restless, but in the middle of all that chaos, one quiet moment changed everything. A man stepped out of a train after a long business trip, adjusting his coat and scanning the platform. People rushed past him, families hugging, vendors shouting, travelers dragging heavy bags. But his eyes suddenly stopped on something that didn't belong in his world anymore. Sitting near a cold concrete pillar was a young beggar woman with a worn scarf wrapped around her shoulders and an empty tin bowl placed on the ground in front of her. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her clothes old and dusty, and her eyes held a sadness that only life's harshest storms could leave behind. For most people, she was just another invisible face in a busy station. But for him, she was someone he never expected to see again. Because that beggar was the same girl who had once rejected his proposal years ago. Before we continue this emotional story, take a quick moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to change lives, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching journeys like this one. Years earlier, that same train station had witnessed a completely different moment in his life. Back then, he was just a quiet young man with simple dreams and a heart full of hope. His name was Armand, and he worked a modest job in a small company, saving money slowly while trying to build a better future. Life had never been easy for him, but he carried himself with determination and dignity. What made his days brighter was a young woman named Mira, someone he had admired for years. She was known in their town for her beauty, confidence, and ambition. People often described her as someone destined for a grand life, someone who would never settle for ordinary. Armand had fallen in love with her silently. It wasn't the loud, dramatic kind of love people talked about. It was the quiet kind that grows slowly in the corners of the heart. He admired the way she spoke with confidence, the way she carried herself with pride, and the dreams she had for her future. For a long time, he kept those feelings hidden because he feared that someone like him could never belong in her world. But love has a strange way of pushing people beyond their fears. One evening, after months of gathering courage, Armand finally decided to tell her how he felt. The moment happened near that same train station where people often gathered after work. His hands trembled slightly, and his voice was softer than usual, but his words were sincere and full of hope. He spoke about his feelings, about how long he had admired her, and about the life he dreamed of building with her someday. What happened next shattered him in a way he had never experienced before. Mira didn't just refuse his proposal, she rejected it with a cold honesty that cut deep into his pride. She told him she had bigger dreams than a life with someone like him. She spoke about wealth, status, and opportunities far beyond the small town they lived in. She said she wanted a life of luxury, travel, and success, not a future limited by someone who struggled to make ends meet.
Her words were not shouted, but they were sharp enough to leave scars that stayed with him for years. That night, Armand walked home alone under dim streetlights, feeling as if the world had quietly closed a door in front of him. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt. It was the realization that he had been measured and found lacking. For a long time, he wondered if she was right about him. Maybe he really was too ordinary to deserve something extraordinary. But sometimes, pain becomes the fuel for transformation. Instead of allowing the rejection to break him completely, Armand decided to change the direction of his life. He worked harder than he ever had before. He studied new skills late into the night, took risks others were afraid to take, and slowly began climbing toward a future he once thought impossible. Years passed, and his determination slowly reshaped his life. The quiet young man who once struggled financially eventually became a successful entrepreneur with businesses that stretched across cities. Yet despite all his success, the memory of that moment near the train station never completely faded. It stayed buried somewhere deep in his mind, like a distant echo from another lifetime. And now, years later, fate had brought him back to the same place. Standing on the platform, Armand looked again at the woman sitting on the cold floor with her small begging bowl. At first, he thought his mind might be playing tricks on him. But as he looked closer, the familiar shape of her eyes and the outline of her face slowly confirmed the truth he struggled to accept. It was Mira. The confident woman who once spoke about luxury and grand dreams now looked like someone life had forgotten. For a moment, Armand froze, unsure what he was feeling. Shock was the first emotion that struck him, followed quickly by confusion. He had imagined many different futures for her over the years, perhaps living in a large city, perhaps married to someone wealthy, perhaps enjoying the glamorous life she had always wanted. But never, not even once, had he imagined seeing her sitting on the ground asking strangers for spare coins. A train whistle echoed through the station, but Armand barely noticed it. Memories flooded his mind like a storm. He remembered her confident voice, her proud smile, the way she had once looked at him with polite distance as she explained that he wasn't the future she wanted. Now that same woman looked fragile, exhausted, and painfully alone. Something inside him twisted with a strange mixture of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing her this way, no sense of revenge, only a quiet sadness that settled in his chest. He took a few slow steps closer. Mira didn't recognize him at first. She kept her gaze lowered, her hand lightly resting near the tin bowl as people walked past without noticing her. To them, she was just another beggar in a place filled with forgotten stories. But when Armand stopped in front of her, she finally looked up. For a brief moment, confusion filled her tired eyes, then recognition appeared slowly, like a memory rising from deep water. Her expression froze, and the world around them seemed to fall silent. The man standing before her was no longer the shy young man she once knew. He was well-dressed, confident, and clearly successful. And yet his eyes still carried the same quiet kindness she had once overlooked.
For a long moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the station continued around them, people rushing, announcements echoing through speakers, trains arriving and departing, but it felt distant, as if the world had stepped back to allow this unexpected reunion to unfold. Mira quickly lowered her gaze again, shame washing across her face. Years ago, she had looked down on him because he had little money and an uncertain future. Now she sat on the ground with nothing, while he stood before her, dressed in success and stability. The contrast was painful and impossible to ignore. Armand noticed the change in her immediately. The confident woman who once spoke with bold certainty had disappeared. In her place was someone fragile, someone who seemed to carry the heavy weight of regret and hardship. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled her worn scarf tighter around her shoulders, as if trying to hide from the truth standing right in front of her. Armand felt an ache in his chest.
He had spent years imagining what he might say if he ever saw her again, but none of those imagined words felt right in this moment. Life had clearly taken her down a path she never expected, and whatever happened along the way had been cruel. He slowly knelt down so that he was no longer standing above her. The gesture surprised her. Most people either ignored beggars or dropped a coin quickly without making eye contact, but Armin looked at her not with pity, but with a quiet respect that made the moment even harder for her to bear. Time had changed them both in ways neither of them had imagined. The station lights flickered as another train rolled past, and Armin's mind filled with questions he didn't yet know how to ask. How had her life fallen so far? What had happened to the dream she once spoke about with such certainty? And why had fate chosen this exact moment to bring them together again? For a long moment, he simply sat there in silence, allowing the shock of the encounter to settle. Mira finally gathered enough courage to glance up again. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion, but also something deeper, an emotion that looked like regret slowly rising to the surface. Years earlier, she had believed she understood the world. She had believed success belonged only to the wealthy and powerful. She had believed kindness and sincerity were not enough to build the life she wanted. That belief had guided many of her decisions, pushing her toward choices that seemed promising at the time. But life has a way of revealing truths that pride often hides. After rejecting Armin, Mira had left the small town with dreams of building a glamorous future in the city. At first, everything seemed exciting. The city offered opportunities, connections, and people who spoke the language of ambition she admired. She met someone who appeared to embody everything she wanted, a man who drove expensive cars, wore elegant suits, and promised her a life filled with luxury. For a while, it seemed like she had made the right choice, but appearances can be deceiving. The man she trusted turned out to be someone very different from the person he pretended to be. His wealth was built on fragile foundations, and his charm masked a selfish nature that slowly revealed itself over time. What began as a promising relationship gradually became a trap she struggled to escape. When his business collapsed under legal troubles and debt, everything around him began to crumble. The life of luxury disappeared almost overnight. Friends vanished, opportunities faded, and the man who once promised to protect her future abandoned her when things became difficult. Mira suddenly found herself alone in a city that had no reason to care about her. With no strong connections and very little money left, survival became her only goal. She searched for jobs, moving from place to place, often facing rejection or exploitation. The world she once believed would welcome her now treated her like a stranger with no value. Months turned into years of struggle. Eventually, the situation became even worse. A series of unfortunate events, losing temporary work, falling ill, and having no family nearby, pushed her further toward desperation. Step by step, life closed its doors until she reached the point she never thought possible: begging. Sitting on a cold station floor had once been unimaginable to her. Yet there she was, surviving day by day on the small kindness of strangers who rarely stopped long enough to notice her face. And now, of all people in the world, the man she once rejected had appeared before her again. Armin listened quietly as pieces of her story slowly emerged. He didn't interrupt, he didn't judge. The years had taught him that life is far more complicated than simple right or wrong decisions. What he saw in front of him was not the proud woman who once dismissed him. What he saw was a human being who had suffered, learned painful lessons, and lost almost everything along the way. And strangely, the resentment he once thought he might feel simply wasn't there. Instead, a different emotion grew stronger in his heart: compassion.
The station slowly grew quieter as evening approached, and the golden light of sunset slipped through the high windows of the platform. People continued to move around them, unaware that something profound was unfolding in that small corner near the pillar. Armand sat beside Mira for a long time, listening to the story of the years that had broken her spirit. Every hardship she described felt like a reminder of how unpredictable life can be. Dreams that once seemed certain can disappear in a moment, and the people we trust the most can sometimes leave the deepest wounds. Yet what struck him the most was not her suffering. It was the regret in her voice. She spoke about the past carefully, as if every memory carried weight. She admitted that rejecting him had not only been about ambition, but also about pride. At that time, she believed kindness and sincerity were weaknesses in a world driven by power and money. Only after experiencing life's harshest lessons did she understand how wrong she had been. Armand remained silent for a long moment after hearing everything. He looked at the tired woman beside him and thought about the long journey both of them had taken since the day their paths separated. Life had given him success, but it had also taught him humility. And now, standing at this unexpected crossroads again, he realized something important. The past could not be changed, but the future still could. Without saying anything dramatic, Armand quietly stood up and extended his hand toward her. The gesture surprised Mira more than anything else that had happened that day. She looked at his hand, then at his face, unsure if she understood what he meant. People had walked past her countless times over the years, but no one had ever offered something like this. Not just money, a chance. Armand's eyes held the same calm kindness they always had. The years had made him stronger, more confident, but they had not erased the compassion that once made him admire her despite everything. He wasn't offering charity, he was offering dignity. Slowly, with trembling hands, Mira accepted his help and stood up from the cold floor of the station. For the first time in years, she was no longer sitting there as someone the world ignored. Tears filled her eyes, not because of shame, but because of the overwhelming realization that someone she had once hurt deeply was now the person helping her rise again. Armand arranged for her to stay in a safe place that very night. He made sure she had proper food, clean clothes, and medical care after years of neglect. But more importantly, he gave her something she had lost long ago: hope. Over the following weeks, Armand helped her rebuild her life step by step. He didn't try to erase her past or pretend the years of hardship had never happened. Instead, he helped her find stability again by encouraging her to regain independence. He arranged work opportunities where she could start fresh, learn new skills, and slowly rebuild her confidence. The journey wasn't easy. Some days were difficult, and memories of the past still haunted her, but this time she wasn't alone. What surprised Mira the most was not his generosity, it was his forgiveness. He never once reminded her of the rejection that had once broken his heart. He never used the past as a weapon against her. Instead, he treated her with patience and respect, as if the years between them were simply a long detour rather than a permanent divide. Through that kindness, Mira slowly began to heal. She worked harder than she ever had before, determined to prove not only to him, but also to herself that she could rebuild her life with honesty and humility. The woman who once chased luxury without understanding its cost now valued something far more important: character. Months passed, and the transformation was remarkable. The fragile woman who once sat at a station with an empty bowl gradually became someone stronger and more confident. The pain of her past never fully disappeared, but it became a reminder of how far she had come. One evening, as they stood again at the same train station where their story unexpectedly restarted, Mira looked around at the busy platform and realized how differently she now saw the world. Years ago, she believed wealth defined success. Now she understood something deeper. True success was measured by the kindness we show when we have the power to choose differently. Before we reach the ending of this story, we have a small request for you. Please write the word kindness in the comments if you believe one act of compassion can completely change someone's life. Armand looked at the station with quiet reflection. The same place that once held the memory of rejection now became the place where forgiveness changed two lives. He had learned that success means little if it hardens the heart. And Mira had learned that pride can blind us to the people who truly care. Their story didn't end like a fairy tale romance from the past. Instead, it became something more meaningful, a story about redemption, humility, and the quiet power of compassion. Sometimes the people who once walk away from us return not to reopen old wounds, but to remind us how much we've grown. And sometimes the greatest victory in life is not proving someone wrong, but choosing kindness when you finally have the chance. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that everyone deserves a second chance, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that celebrate humanity and hope.